All right. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. We are super excited that you are here. We have some amazing authors. We have some amazing panelists. We have a few moderators that are going to help our discussion along tonight. If you have questions throughout this moderated part of our discussion tonight, please feel free to use the chat function and we will have somebody. Tim Abeska is here. He's one of our amazing volunteers. He has volunteered to be chat monitor and he will share those out. And then we will certainly have time at the end for questions. And I am also going to put in the chat the link to all of the books for each of our authors. So if you are so inclined to purchase the book, I'm going to wait till later so that you pay attention. I'm a former professor, and I know if you distract students or participants with something, they're not going to pay attention. So I don't want you shopping on Amazon until we're ready for you to shop on Amazon. So I'll put those in the chat in a little bit. But I am going to let Patrick introduce himself as well. He is also from the I AM ALS side. I work with Tim as part of our community outreach team that is one of the co-hosts of tonight's event. So if you have questions about I AM ALS or would like to be part of our volunteer corps, we can also share that information. And then Patrick, do you want to talk about the Scribes team?
Hey there. Thanks so much, Christy. Great to see everyone tonight. My name's Patrick Nicholas. I'm the ALS support lead at I AM ALS. I have a privilege of being one of the co-facilitators on the I AM ALS side for the Scribes of Strength group. A little bit about the group. The Scribes of Strength celebrates creativity, diversity through storytelling. The group shares their experiences to raise awareness and share creativity to those who have been impacted by ALS. The goal of the group really is to create and foster an open, welcoming space for storytellers of all kinds, all backgrounds, abilities, and experience levels. And we really want to create a space for folks to feel home, to really explore or sharpen their creative and writing skills. So if folks want to learn more about the group, feel free to email me directly. I will also include a link to the blog if you want to read some of the entries from our incredible members. And I can also open it up to if any of our moderators or facilitators would like to add. I know we have, I think, all of our co-chairs here, which is great to see as well.
Awesome.
I mean, you described us to a T, so thank you for that.
Thank
Awesome.
you, Ellen.
So I'm going to play just a quick intro that somebody prepared for us, and then I'm going to kick it over to Ellen Adcock, who is going to be our lead moderator for tonight. So let me share my screen very quickly.
Hi, my name is Laura Voltaggio. I'm a high school English teacher in Belmont, Massachusetts, and I have a Bookstagram account where I review books that I have read, loved, and would like to share with others. And I am here tonight more from my perspective as an English teacher, just to talk a little bit about the importance of storytelling. And as many of you know, the ability of storytelling to really connect people and build community. One of my favorite quotes from a text that I teach to my students called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien is that stories can save us. And I really do think that that's true. When I Am ALS gifted me a copy of The ALS Express by Juan Reyes, I found many of the same sentiments in his work as well. I think that Juan's book is really focused on supporting others who are going through their journey with ALS, as well as caregivers. And his book is just a really beautiful representation of his own experiences, as well as a tool that others can use to help them through the process of coming to terms with their diagnosis or their loved one's diagnosis, and using storytelling as a way to empower the individual. I think that Juan's book really does an excellent job of this, and I'm excited to hear about the books of other authors that are shared here tonight. I know that they are all really important stories, and the community that will grow as a result of this event is really wonderful, and I'm excited to see where it all takes us. I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I look forward to reading more of your stories very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That is Laura. Unfortunately, she could not join us tonight, but she should have sent that video ahead of time. So again, thank you all for being here, and I am going to hand the baton over to Ellen.
Well, great. I'm really excited about this night. I've been waiting it for this night for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I'm really grateful you guys could all make it. I'm going to introduce a couple of our moderators who are going to help us with the questions. Emily Sorbonne is one of the Scribes of Strength. She and I co-lead the team. She's going to be helping with questions, as will Caroline Treadway tonight. I would like to start us off with reading bios for all of our authors so that you guys can get to know them a little bit. So Maya Carter has written The Sweet Between, a Soft Reset, a living invitation to rest, reflect, and return to yourself. It's a 14-day renewal guide. Maya Carter is a writer, a caregiver, and a graduate student pursuing her master's in marriage and family therapy with a focus on medical family therapy. She's the founder of The Sweet Between Press and author of the phenomenal The Sweet Between, a Soft Reset. It's described as being born in the sacred space where exhaustion meets endurance. Her upcoming publication, The Sweet Onion, A Return to Self, is due to hit the shelf soon. Both books are deeply rooted in faith, legacy, and lived experience of caregiving. Maya is a full-time caregiver to her husband, Maceo, I hope I didn't just slaughter his name, who is living with ALS, and a mother of 3. Her work centers the voices of Black women, caregivers, and those carrying generational stories of strength and survival. Through storytelling, reflection, and advocacy, she creates spaces for truth, rest, and reclamation. Learn more about her work at thesweetbetween.org. Then we have Mindy Uhrlaub, who has just dropped The Last Nerve, a memoir of illness and endurance of family. Her debut novel, Unnatural Resources, was published in November of 2020 by The Permanent Press after receiving a starred review from the Library Journal and praise from Publishers Weekly. For her work on The Last Nerve, a memoir of illness and the endurance of family, Mindy was awarded residencies at Malay Arts, the Hambridge, I hope I spelled that right, Hambridge Center, Joyce Maynard's Right by the Lake Lit Camp, and Ragdale for the Arts. Since learning she carries the C9orf72 mutation for ALS and FTD, Mindy has testified before the FDA and NIH about the need for pre-symptomatic carriers of ALS to receive medical treatment and participates in more than a dozen ongoing longitudinal studies for C9orf72 carriers. Mindy served on a committee at the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine and contributed to a report, Living with ALS, which detailed recommendations for transforming ALS into a livable disease. As co-founder of Genetic ALS and FTD and The Legacy, which is a nonprofit geared towards advancing the needs for genetic carrier families, Mindy won the 2025 Harvey and Bonnie Gaffin Advancements in ALS Award from the Les Turner ALS Foundation. You can learn more about her at mindyuhrlaub.com. Juan Reyes, whose offering tonight is the ALS Express, Expressive Reflections on Living with ALS. Juan was diagnosed with ALS in May 2016. He retired after serving 21 years in the U.S. Air Force as an independent duty medical technician and a clinic superintendent. Following his service in the Air Force, he worked as a defense contractor for Battelle Memorial Institute, managing emergency medical disaster response for 13 Air Force hospitals and clinics. He later served as an executive director of the San Antonio Salvation Army Area Command, overseeing community services across the region. As a person living with ALS, Juan shares his insights with medical students and healthcare professionals and advocates for patients at the national level. As a patient mentor, he supports newly diagnosed individuals navigating their journey with ALS. Juan serves on several local and national committees, including I AM ALS, the NEALS Consortium, and the ALS MND International Alliance, and is a patient ambassador for Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America, makers of Radicava. Juan resides with his wife Meg and his 4 children in Castroville, Texas. You can catch up with him and his latest thoughts at scribes4als.com. Lori Larson Heller has written Buckle Up Because Grief Doesn't Come with GPS or Decent Rest Stops. Hard work and a positive attitude has always paid off for Lori Larson Heller. With only a high school diploma in hand, she cultivated a successful 35-year career in commercial real estate investment, rising to the level of executive vice president and partner at premier national organizations. A recipient of several coveted awards in her field, Lori has always harbored a desire to help others and has served on the board of directors for various nonprofits, volunteering her time for more than 20 years. Lori wrote her book, Buckle Up, after the death of her husband with ALS. This read is an honest, hopeful, and sometimes even humorous guide to getting through loss without losing yourself in the process. In her retirement from her executive positions, Lori is proud to identify herself as a mother, grandmother, writer, and ALS advocate. You can learn more about her at LoriLarsonHeller.com. Cindy Mammalian has written Scratch My Itch, a caregiver's honest, humorous, and healing stories about the horrors of ALS. Cindy's a PhD criminologist, a storyteller and a writer, and a mother of 3. After a brief career writing federal grant solicitations and research reports in the field of criminal justice, she redirected her love of writing to a memoir after spending 3 years living with and caring for her mother who had ALS. In 2021, she was awarded second place in Bethesda Magazine's essay contest for an essay titled Pink, Berry, Plum, Maybe, but Never Peach, which is now one chapter in her memoir, Scratch My Itch. Cindy is a development director at a private Episcopal school and lives in Potomac, Maryland with her husband. Her website is cindymammalian.com. And finally, Jen Parker, who has written The Strength of Love, an ALS journey with Brian Parker. She is currently serving as the Associate Director of Fact Relief, a Georgia-based 501c3 nonprofit organization that allows for contributions to be donated to families battling illness in a manner that ensures money raised does not count towards a beneficiary's assets or income. Jen joined the FACT team in 2021 after her husband Brian passed from ALS. As Brian's primary caregiver for over 10 years, Jen learned much about caregiving and how to navigate the healthcare system. A philanthropist at heart, FACT is not Jen's first foray into service. In 2000, Jen and Brian helped found a nonprofit organization in Atlanta called Local Love Loud, bringing the Atlanta music scene together to help support Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Ben received a BA in criminal justice from the University of Alabama in 1996 and currently lives in Cumming, Georgia with her 2 cats and honeybee hives. And with that, we would like to get started with our questions. I think Emily is first up.
Yeah. So nice to have all of you today. And this is a question actually that's directed to all of the authors. Going back to the beginning, what inspired you to start writing and how has that evolved through your ALS journey? And let's go to Mindy.
Thanks for having me here today. I've actually been a writer my whole life. At age 17, I wrote music in a band for many, many years. I wrote screenplays, and when my kids were young, I started writing essays about parenting, and I wrote my first novel that was published in 2020 after I did some research in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I was already an activist and I was already an author when my mom was diagnosed with ALS. And during that time, my husband was going through stage 4 lymphoma. I had a son who had to be committed to a residential treatment facility. And my mom was dying of ALS, and then I received my genetic diagnosis. And so basically, I can't say that my storytelling has changed or my activism has changed because I already was both of those things. I just used both of those superpowers to write this memoir.
Thanks, Mindy. That's a lot at once to go through. Um, Lori, how about you?
Yeah, for me, and I guess the opposite of Mindy, I wasn't a writer. So writing for me did not start as a book. It started as therapy. So maybe somebody else on this call will say the same thing, but when my husband was diagnosed with ALS, and I quit work that day and intending to go back to work, by the way, but he passed away. He only battled for about 20 months. And he died in May of 2020. So it's just been 5 years now. But I started writing because my counselor said, you need to journal. That's how you're going to get through this, is write down your thoughts. And so I started doing it, and it did become kind of a way of life. And so when he passed away, and we're 2 months into COVID, you know, I didn't, not really one bone in my body wanted to go back to work. And so I just got very active in the ALS world, still am, never returned actually to my career. But then a series of, if I would have just taken that journaling and tried to talk about a book, I don't think I had the wisdom at that point, because I certainly had the experience of going through that with Jim, but I didn't have um, kind of more knowledge about life, I guess. And so I continued on with my journaling after I lost him in May of 2020. And, more trials and tribulations happened. I took a very major fall and was in the hospital for 5 weeks. A really tough period. I lost my dad and my brother both to cancer within 2 weeks of each other. So we had back-to-back funerals. I'm losing my mom right now, one piece at a time because of Alzheimer's. And it was this last kind of tribulation, I guess, with my mom that caused me to think about maybe taking some of this journaling and putting it into a book. And it's really because if any of you, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Brene Brown, I had seen a quote of hers, and it said, someday your story will be someone else's survival guide. And it really hit me, you guys, because that's really what got me through it. When I had my toughest times, it was hearing somebody else's story and seeing that they had come out the other side, seeing that they were still standing. And so it just inspired me to say, you know what, maybe that's true. Maybe somebody will read your story and it will help them. And so I was going to be happy if I sold one book and one person got back to me and said, you helped me, because that's really what I was looking for. So that's how I got into it.
Thanks for sharing, Lori. Cindy, how about you?
Well, and thank you all for arranging this panel tonight. It's funny, I often say that I really believe caregiving is a yet to be recognized Olympic sport. And very often people who are caring for a family member feel like they're on an island unto themselves. I initially started writing as one way to reflect on my experience of living with my mom, Barbara, and caring for her during her ALS battle. A lot of my initial writing actually happened during her 3 years. Similar to what Lori was saying about journaling, I would finish caring for my mom with my dad every night after midnight. And I would come up from the basement level where they were living with us, and I would need to unwind. And I would pour myself a glass of wine or two, and I would start typing. And it was what I was thinking and feeling and experiencing as a caregiver who was also trying to be a daughter and a wife and a mother raising 3 young children. I'm part of that sandwich generation we all hear about. Initially, my writing was like having a diary, dear diary, today totally sucked. And, or I would email a friend and share everything that had happened that day. But years after my mom passed away and after hours spent on the clinical couch in therapy, I began to appreciate how maybe sharing my story and my mother's story might be helpful to other people and might raise awareness about ALS and caregiving. And I did ultimately want to share my story, just I think in the same way the other authors have started talking about, just so that other caregivers would know they aren't alone in what they are thinking and feeling and experiencing. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So ultimately, I poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat at the table every day during daylight hours, And I wrote this book pulling from my diary entries and from emails I sent friends. I sort of made a list of the topics I wanted to talk about or stories I wanted to share and started creating Scratch My Itch, which ultimately turned out to be something that's a little bit love letter, a little bit confession, and a little bit comedy.
Thank you, Cindy. Juan Reyes.
There we go.
There you go.
First of all, thank you for everyone involved in making this happen. And to the question, I was not a writer. In fact, I was an artist my entire life. First being published in third grade, and then continuing with artwork, doing murals, paintings, pastels, etc. When ALS got away from me, when I lost the use of my hands. The first few patients I encountered with ALS, the majority of them had lost their voice and were not able to speak anymore or to speak clearly. And it really impacted me because they were not able to share their experiences without the use of technology. In May of 2016, being that it was ALS Awareness Month, I decided to write something about ALS every day for the month. And it was very crude, lots of mistakes, errors, and misspellings. And it really resonated with me that the community, patients, caregivers, and family members were really interested in hearing the perspective of a patient experiencing ALS. And I decided then that to write it. It began on Facebook and grew from there to multiple blogs, culminating in the blog website, Scribes for ALS, which I established for the I AM ALS community. And I'm very proud of the team that has evolved from that. And because many people on social media encouraged me to write a book and publish, I decided to do so. I never imagined that I would be an author, but here I am.
What an
Thank
author
you.
you are. We're really glad you're here, Juan.
Thanks, Juan. Maya.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I would say that I've written for myself always as a way to just express, just to deal with life in general. And when I started putting the book together, it was basically I go in the garage, um, and that's where I meditate. That's where I escape. That's just where I am. I'm in the garage. And every morning I do a scripture and reading the scriptures, I would like think of stories in like my life or my family's life or anything that would like empower me for the day, something to just give me strength to get through. And I would take all of those stories and just like write them down. And then one day I was just like, well, actually, it was my grandmother's 95th birthday. And I wanted her to have all these stories for her 95th birthday. Um, Sorry. But right after I published the book, my sister-in-law passed away. And we didn't expect her to pass away. And I really understood the impact of being able to tell the people that you love while they're still here, the things that you love about them. And it's so powerful to be able to share my love that I have for my husband with my kids. It's so powerful to share our story with other people. And if it helps anybody get through the day, I guess it was worth sharing. So,
Maya, I was really struck by the healing tone that's in your writing. It's really grace-filled and filled with compassion for other people. You always invite caregivers to have compassion for themselves. How do you think you foster that for yourself?
growing up, my mom, she was caregiver for my brother who had diabetes. And she would say she's running away. She's running away. And basically, she would just go to the back porch or somewhere and separate from what was happening in the house. And as a kid, I didn't understand it. I thought she was escaping us. I thought she was leaving us. She didn't go anywhere. She just went to the back, but it felt like, when you say you're running away, you have to get away from the situation you're in. And as I'm in the situation now, I crave those moments where I could just hear me, because it's so much pulling all day, every day. There's so much pulling. It's just, it's nonstop pulling. And so to carve out those moments, even if it's just 10 minutes, I want caregivers to know that it's okay to take your 10 minutes. And it's necessary to take your 10 minutes. And I want pals and cows to know both that it's okay to respect that time apart. That's all.
Excellent. And that's exactly what your guide does. Fantastic. So our next question is for Juan Reyes again. You don't describe yourself as a writer. You described yourself as an artist. But those of us at the Scribes of Strength know you as a writer. And obviously you've written a book. You are a writer, my dear. How do you think ALS has shaped that identity?
I thought about this. I reviewed the question. And I've written this a part of the evolution that ALS creates in us that are living with it. And this includes caregivers, family members, and friends. No one is excluded from the impact and the evolution that is generated by ALS. Personally, I've always said that ALS stripped me of many of my fears and the facades that I created for myself. it stripped me back. And because of that, I'm not able to vulnerably share my thoughts, emotions, and feelings with respect to my journey with ALS. But I go beyond just what I experience. I listen closely to the community, and I try to be of service by interpreting some of the challenges and concerns that I hear others express. And because there are so many patients without the ability to express themselves, I take those thoughts and fears and I convert them to stories in order to help others understand and hopefully provide some clarity to some of those fears and challenges. So ALS has made me fearless in a sense with respect to being able to honestly share what I experienced.
You know, that resonates with me. I bet it resonates with a bunch of people on this panel too. Thank you. Mindy, are there or were there misconceptions about ALS that you wanted to challenge in your writing?
Totally. I mean, first of all, the idea that ALS is a rare disease, it actually isn't. I mean, 1 in 300 people will get ALS, especially if you acknowledge the genetic community. Um, and another thing is that uh, genetic ALS is somehow easier to survive than sporadic ALS. That actually is, everyone's ALS is different and people survive at different rates, right? Um, but, the other thing that I try to sort of poke holes in is that, when the chips are down and you have first order relatives dying off of a fatal neurodegenerative disease for which there's no cure, and you have other family members who are suffering, and then you yourself are stuck with some really hard situation, that it's a good idea to just roll over and give up, And so this idea that you know, that the sandwich generation is somehow has it easy, or can just roll over and give up. I mean, the truth is, because humans typically live longer now, and children tend to be healthier, it's a double-edged sword, and so we're faced with caring for our spouses, our parents, our children, and ourselves at the same time. And so those are some of the things that my book explores. And the other idea that the genetic community, because we're sort of like the low-hanging fruit, because we have a cause of our ALS, that somehow we're gonna just be okay, and that we should be overlooked from things like clinical trials, longitudinal research, you know, um, that made me pretty mad. And being an activist, I sort of had to speak out against that as well. So there are some things that I ask people to chew on in my book.
I think you do a great job with that as well. I mean, I was really struck by how much you undertook and how much you had on your plate at one time and how you've managed to come through it also with grace, and you're still a very open and caring and loving person with everybody that you meet, not just with your family.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. All right, Emily is up next with a few more questions.
Yeah. So this one is for Mindy, Lori, Jen, Juan, and Maya. Was there a moment where you knew your words had reached someone deeply? And what was that like? Or what did that feel like? Let's go to Mindy.
Um, yeah, I mean it right now I'm on a book tour, so it's hard to actually quantify this because the like a couple of weeks ago, um I was doing an event for ALS TDI, and it was a special event because it was a book reading for a bunch of biotech people. And what's interesting is that because the genetic community is often overlooked by biotech, by scientists in general, I had an opportunity to talk to them, and there were like 80 biotech people in the room. And I literally just said, please save me, please save my children. And I think it rocked their world. I think, a lot of people, and excuse me if any of you are biotech people, but a lot of people who are just in labs all day, they don't actually get to see what ALS looks like. They don't get to see how it impacts people and how it becomes everything for not only patients, but caregivers and family members. And so I had people crying in the room, and like that meant something to me. And since then, I've been asked to speak to a lot of biotech companies about genetics, and that's a big deal. It really was impactful for me, and I'm so grateful for my community for recognizing me and my story.
Lori?
Yeah, I think this is a really important one because, and Mindy hit on it, like words are important, really important. And it's funny because I know this question was geared more toward did your words in your book sort of hit people? But I think what was cool for me was that I knew my words were having impact when I was just out talking to people before. And it's really what made me then write the book. So, I'm in Minneapolis where it's a smaller community, but I know the neurologist in town, friends of friends of friends. Somehow I feel like I end up talking to almost every family here that ends up getting this fatal diagnosis. And it became obvious to me how important words are and how I could help people just through words. And so I've met with so many people, and you can tell when you've said something that is really meaningful to someone. Um, or people would say, wow, this has really inspired me. Or, again, the tears, the hugs, the thank yous, when you're having an impact. And I think because words are so important and because I knew that they were deeply affecting people, that's what led me to say, you know what, this is great. And I will never say no. I take on every conversation I'm asked to do, but by putting it in a book, there are better chances that more people will get a chance to read those of, someone that I couldn't and didn't meet with. And so that was kind of all before the book. And then after the book, you start to get a review on Amazon or just the personal notes and emails or phone calls of people telling you an actual example. The best part is not just your book did something for me, it's to say, and that part where you said, and I think my book might be a little different than the others in that ALS kind of became only part of my journey. It's the biggest and most important part because it's what set me on this path to, if you read my book, I talk about old me and new me, but it's what caused me to become new me. And but then all the things, by waiting 5 years, I guess, after losing Jim to write this, it's about ALS, but it's also about it's words about living life and words about losing the fear of death and things that just otherwise I think can really keep a person down or not allow them to see the hope in, the rest of your future. So, yeah, it's been really rewarding and really validating to hear from people after putting the book out too.
Jen?
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm loving this discussion from everybody, and I echo a lot of what Mindy and Lori say. about touching people and just having the impact. When my husband first got ALS, we weren't too public about it. And in the beginning, he just really didn't want to share pictures or anything like that. And then we would get more comfortable with it. And so then we started a blog, and I would post on Facebook just about, what it was like to go to the doctor, what it was like to go to clinic, and what it was like to experience being a caregiver for him. And then I started a website and I started really writing a blog. And there was one particular thing that I wrote that I really wasn't even sure I wanted to put out. I'm already an overthinker, but it was a letter to myself about how hard it was to be an ALS caregiver and how I said things I didn't want to say. I acted ways I didn't want to act. And I was just telling myself, it's okay, it's hard, give yourself that grace and, carry on, and that you're stronger than you think. And I sat on it forever, and I finally hit the publish button. And a while later, somebody reached out to me on Instagram and said, I read your letter. I could have written that letter. I would never put it out there that way. They were scared, but that it just really impacted them and they didn't feel alone. And so then I didn't feel alone, even though I was so scared to actually put that raw honesty out there. So for them to actually say that, and then we became friends, and then that sort of thing would happen over time as I would share more and more. And then I think to Lori's point, I became a different person after ALS. I really did accept my own mortality. I think so many people don't want to talk about death or don't really want to accept that we're going to die. So I just started living in a different way. And I think that had I not gone through ALS, I wouldn't have had the strength to write that book and share that story and have people relate to it. So I just hope it helps. And I think it does. So thank you.
I would echo that. It definitely does, Jen.
Yeah. I know that my perspective on death totally changed after my dad passed from ALS, and I've become more, I don't know if welcoming is the right word, but more accepting and being more comfortable with it. Yeah, so I agree. Juan, how about you?
Thank you. There is one particular incident that stands out in my mind that really solidified my need to write and share my experience. And I don't recall the piece that I wrote that elicited this response, but I had a colleague that I had worked with during my defense contracting period after retiring from the Air Force. I had known him for quite some time, but I had not worked with him until after I retired. And we were not close, but we spoke on social media and had exchanges. After I began writing, I was surprised to get a message from him. And in that message, he made me aware that he had never shared with anyone that his mother had passed of ALS years ago. And that what I was sharing on Facebook really resonated with him and allowed him to experience what his mom had gone through.
Time to drink some water?
Because she was not able to communicate. And at that time, there was no technology that helped produce. And that really hit me. And I committed to sharing as much as I could.
Juan, you have shared so much of your own experience with other people along your journey. You don't just think of your own journey. You are very aware of the suffering of others as well. And I know that your openness and honesty has helped many in their own journeys. And I want to thank you for that.
Maya?
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna follow Juan. Okay. 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 For me, it's hearing from other caregivers that they feel seen and appreciated, and that they actually took from my book to rest for themselves. But in a general sense, when my husband was first diagnosed 8 years ago, the first thing I did was I went to Google and I Googled Black people with ALS, and nothing came up. There was nothing. There was nobody. It was an attack on my own. Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, he can't be the only Black man with ALS. Like that's just not a thing. And so I Googled and I looked, and one of the reasons why we got into advocacy is because we wanted to make ALS accessible. You know, this is what ALS looks like, and it looks like all of us, right? It looks like everybody. But when we first got in there, you didn't see everybody. And so one of the most amazing things that occurred for me was when you Google Black families with ALS, my family comes up. My family comes up. And yeah, we all know ALS is horrible. But to know that no other family has to feel like mine, has to feel like they're alone in this just because of their race or where they come from or anything like that. That's everything. I didn't know that's why I wrote the book, but I guess that's why. Because it's really lonely to feel lonely in an isolated disease. Like everybody's alone, you know? And then to feel alone in your isolation is shattering. It's shattering. And I never want anybody to feel like that. So now I know people are like, oh my God, you're associated with ALS for the rest of your life. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I'm so proud that if you Google Black families with ALS, mine comes up. And I want you to reach out to me. And I want you to know you're not alone. And I want you to know that I see you. And if my book does that for anybody, I don't care. I feel good. So that's, for me, that's the most important part, is that people who would have felt unseen now feel seen. So,
amen. All right, next up we have Caroline with a couple of questions.
Good for you, Maya. Good for you. Wow. Juan, I'd like to ask you a question. Has writing helped you process or reframe your diagnosis in any way?
It has drastically. First of all, you won't believe it, but I am a lifelong introvert. Meg will attest to that. For years, I was always her boyfriend, her fiance, her husband. And now she is my wife, my friend, my driver. So the roles have changed because ALS has made me, as I mentioned, somewhat fearless. I don't fear public speaking. I even do stand-up comedy. One nurse put it very succinctly when I was at ALS clinic. He mentioned that my relations had evolved, and my assumption was that he was talking about my marriage. And he clarified that he wasn't thinking about my relationship with me. He was talking about my relationship with the disease. And that I had evolved to the point of being able to live alongside with ALS and not allowing to dictate how I live my life. So, yeah, my condition has changed me drastically for the better, I believe.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ellen, do you want me to take the next one? Or you're going to take the next one?
Why don't you take the next one?
Okay. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Maya, I'm going to ask you, can you walk us through your writing process?
Sure. It's apparently I have a process. Who knew? Who knew? But it's layered. You know, I often start in prayer. I often start in a state of what am I asking for today? What do I need? I write for myself. I write the book. When I was writing the book, I was encouraging myself. I'm telling myself to keep going. So, you know, from there, like I said before, I weave in memories, maybe family stories and legacies that help me understand how what I'm reading and what I'm experiencing. I'm a historian by nature, so I believe that everything has been experienced in a way. And if I can just see the patterns, I can understand how to move forward. That's just how I process life sometimes. And so when I'm writing in layers, it's like peeling an onion, you know? And I like to get to the heart of what my message is, and then it just sprouts from there. Sometimes it's pages and sometimes it's a sentence, but the problem is the stop. It's where to stop. Like I always just like, oh, I can add this, or I could say it this way, or I could do it that way. So the problem is how you stop. So yeah, that's where I end up at.
How about any of the other authors? Do any of you have a particular process through which you write? Juan, how about you?
Well, I tend to write based on conversations that I have and I hear. I also make notes of topics or subjects that I might find interesting. And I also use a lot of humor and alliteration because I think it's fun to illustrate the humanity and the humor that we have to find in ALS, because otherwise it's just unrelenting suffering. We have to find something to laugh at. And with respect to how I write, I then just put words down and then go back and rewrite. I can find myself like Maya, just adding more words and get lost in my thoughts. No, I have to be stern with myself and say, that's enough. And that'll do.
Anybody else want to add to that? All right. And my next question is for Jen. Jen, reading stories of your life with Brian was really touching, and learning about your spirit and his and your life together really touched off a lot of memories for me about my marriage to Larry and our life together. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you might have found some freedom in writing and what tools you used to do that? Was it digital? Did you translate it orally? Did you have yellow legal pads? How did you do it?
Good question. Typically, I mean, my brain is always overthinking. There's always words up there. And so pretty much any day I'm sidetracking and just typing, just writing something either to get it out emotionally or writing a social media caption. Even sometimes I like to do that I just love words. I love to put words together and see how they'll flow. With the book, I typically would type. Sometimes I would write, but I don't know. I can't write as fast as I could possibly think. So I love to type. I can type usually the fastest. Sometimes I'll speak to something, you do a voice recording. But I don't know. I did take a writing class one time. I highly recommend. I did take a writing class to where you had 11 minutes and somebody would prompt you and you had to write for the entire 11 minutes. And that's a totally different type of writing. I don't know how to explain it, but when you type, it's different than writing. So as an exercise, I do like to do that from time to time. But there is something about, for me, getting the words out in a way that I like to see them that just makes me feel better. It's cathartic. And then as I was putting the book together, I was like, okay, this is hell on earth, but let's put some funny stuff in there too. So it was fun to think about memories and then how can I make this funny for the reader? They don't want to it's not going to be all doom and gloom. So it was very cathartic, but yeah, I typically just type. Unfortunately, something shiny is me thinking of something to type or write. So it's a problem with ADHD. But yeah, I love to type and get words and think that they sound pretty together. So yeah, I'm pretty much always writing.
I like to read or write kind of in an encapsulation. I always have an idea of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and I kind of think about where I'm going to end up as I'm beginning. And I just kind of weave this story, and it's usually only like a 2 or 3 minute thing, but I can almost always just get that entire thought out, and then I sit back and look at it, kind of like the way you look at a quilt when you've quilted a quilt, and you're like, oh, look at this quilt, I did it, and wrap yourself up in it. I like to wrap myself up in what I wrote.
That's a
after I
great
do.
way to put it. And you have great Facebook posts, and you're very descriptive as well. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, thank
Let
you.
it all out.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Emily, it's your turn.
All right. So how do you think storytelling can drive awareness or change within the ALS space? And this goes back to you, Jen.
I thought about this earlier. I was just thinking about how we're talking about how storytelling is reaching people, and people come back to you and say, I didn't feel alone. Thank you for sharing that. And I don't want to get touchy or on a subject, but I just remember being younger and my parents would tell me, it's not polite to talk about money, religion, or politics. And then as I've gotten older, I think the only way to understand another person is to communicate with them. So why are we not talking about these things? So I believe that sharing awareness about ALS, because I had no idea what ALS was, how involved it was, how it impacted everybody around that person. And my friends didn't realize that either. And so if we didn't share what we were really going through, we wouldn't have been able to have fundraisers and have people come bring us groceries and things like that. If you don't share things and the truth with people, they won't know. So I truly believe that being open, honest, raw about ALS is really how to make change and have people understand that it's so underfunded and it's so horrible, and 1 in 300 is a very scary statistic. So yes, let's make some change. And I think we're doing that right here, right now.
You are. You're right.
Definitely. Cindy, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, as we all know, there are so many parts of ALS that are maddening and entirely unfair for the ALS patient, starting with getting a diagnosis that offers no cure. And the demands from the caregiver perspective, they're often overwhelming and challenging and hard to manage. But caregivers often feel guilty for having or sharing any feelings of anger, frustration, resentment, even sadness, because the people for whom we are caring are struggling with so much more. It's complicated, but I honestly think that in addition to sharing the stories of ALS patients, I think sharing the stories of caregivers, it's important, and it's ultimately going to increase awareness about the disease. My pastor, Emily D'Andrea, once wrote, I'm going to get her quote right. She says, ALS is awful and caregiving is hard, but we all get better at it by learning from one another's wins and wounds. And I just loved that characterization. And I just hope through my story, through everyone's stories who's on this panel today, that, in shining light on the day-to-day realities of living with and caring for someone who has ALS, that we get more people to understand why it is, why research dollars are so important and needed so that we can find a cure for this disease.
Maya?
And Maya, you're still muted, babe.
Okay, let's fix that. I
All
found
right.
this question really important, so I wrote down my answer. So I just wanted to get that out there. So I think that stories make ALS human. Facts and numbers matter, but they don't move people the way like stories do. When you're diagnosed, you get the 2 to 5 years prognosis, and that's a statistic. But life is not a statistic, And storytelling shows the fullness of raising kids, holding love, laughter, grieving, and still finding joy in the midst of the madness that is ALS, because there is no pause in it. You go from diagnosis to living with to grieving, and it just doesn't stop until it stops. And as a caregiver, I believe our stories matter too. We are often pushed to the sidelines, forgotten in the shadows of ALS, but we need care and recognition as part of the whole picture. I believe that caring for caregivers allows for better patient care, and this includes mental health care. These are all vital in the caring of someone who is living with ALS. And sharing our stories doesn't take away, as caregivers, doesn't take away from ALS, but it completes the full story, and it adds strength to the person living with ALS. And it shows the community that is totally affected. It's systemic, the way ALS affects every single person. And then my last point there is that there's power in underrepresented communities by telling their stories. Too often, voices are left out. And when we share our stories and open up ourselves, we allow other people to feel comfortable in opening up and sharing their stories. And that leads to earlier diagnosis, that leads to better funding, that leads to better care. And I just think it's really important that we share our stories, because we are the people and we're the ones who can make it all change. So that's all.
Neil, can I take this time to ask Patrick? I know there's been a lot of chat going on in the chat. Can we take a break from the questions, give our authors a chance to take some water, and maybe you get us caught up in the chat a little bit?
Sure, I can do that.
Or Tim, either one.
Patrick, go ahead.
Sounds good, Tim. I just want to make sure I capture. I know there's been a lot of incredible praise here. I'll jump in after our pleasantries. Juan shared, to this day, I recall Maceo's statement regarding being a Black man with, I believe, with ALS. Maya said, "We are here because of you. We love you deeply." Christy shared, "We will share the links to all the authors' books at the end." Will shared, "Maya, I would love to read your book." And Maya shared a link to that, which we'll also include. Will shared, "I was pretty new at writing. I was a math and science in my careers. I will definitely read your book. I'm getting to know my voice, and I like to capture other writings to bring me out on paper." Emily said, "You're a fabulous writer, Will." Caroline poised to the group if anyone has any questions for our wonderful authors, so feel free to put those in the chat if folks do. Faith had signed off, and we'll share some of that information. Juan shared some of the tools he utilizes for writing. He said, "Tools I use to write and publish, iGaze, Notes on iPhone, Kindle Create, MS Word, AI for book cover creation. I have also joined communities of creative individuals, some with celebrities, that prompt creative writing, short prompted exercises." Julie shared a link to our Share Our Stories page on our website as well. I think we are caught up. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to have to truncate some of our questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. So Caroline, you're next up with question number 9.
Right.
Can I also just interject real quick before you go forward, Caroline? I don't, with the few minutes that we have left, I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time at the end just for some Q&A.
Right.
So just keep that in mind.
So that'll be the last one.
Okay, I am going to ask this question of Mindy, Lori, Jen, Maya, and Cindy. How do you balance vulnerability and privacy in what you share with the world? And Mindy, if you could let us know that.
As an author, I'm an introvert, and I've learned how to be really extroverted in my writing. I share pretty much everything in my writing. And when this book was published, there were a lot of intimate details about my family, my husband, my children, my parents, and me. Some of it is some of us at our worst, and a lot of it is some of us at our best. And, I think the idea is, whether you're writing fiction or you're writing memoir, to treat everybody with love and respect. And if you can't treat somebody with love and respect in your writing, you need to not write about them. So I'm not saying don't say anything mean about people, because I say plenty of mean things in my book, and I don't hold back. But when I went to publish this book, the publisher actually told me to have everybody read the book before I published it, and sign an actual contract that said it was okay for me to write about them. And the catch with the C9 mutation is that it causes not only ALS, but also frontotemporal degeneration, which is a type of dementia. And I have a family member who I mentioned in my book who behaved very poorly during my mom's illness and currently has FTD. And there was no way I was going to get her to read the book and sign a contract saying that it was okay for me to say these things about her. And so I changed her name in the book. Similarly, I've got some things about, like my dad that were pretty offensive, things that he and I did to each other and with each other when I was younger. And I had to balance, sharing that stuff with having a relationship with my dad. So, at that point, I was just like, well, there's certain things I can put in and certain things that would ruin our relationship. And so I chose not to include those.
Thank you, Mindy. Lori, how about you?
Yeah, I'll keep it short, and I agree with everything Mindy said. But in my case too, if your story or your book is mostly about you and your story, and trying to offer your advice to help other people, I didn't have to worry too much about privacy. But I will say that first of all, I'm not sure I do balance them anymore. In another book talking about other people, I'd probably pay more attention. But one of the things that ALS in that journey taught me was to be vulnerable, and it's a huge gift. I wasn't vulnerable before, and probably other people on here would say that vulnerability would have been a weakness. So being vulnerable, I think, allows you to become the authentic you. And when you're writing, that's what people want. They want the authentic you. They don't want a made up story or whatever. If you're going to do that, then write a romance fiction novel or whatever. So I just think vulnerability is key. And everybody, all of us that are in this together that have been through ALS, I think we all know that, man, ALS is a big lesson in vulnerability. And by the way, our friend Juan on this call, I would argue, is a very good example of this one, because if you follow him on Facebook and read his writings, Juan, it's just beautiful how you share everything, and all your vulnerability is right out there on the page for all of us to read. And I think you give up a lot of privacy to do that, and I applaud you, because it makes everything you say that much more meaningful. So I guess that's it.
Yes, meaningful, powerful. Yep, I agree. Jen, could you take that question?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I echo Mindy and Lori as well. I think over time, as I wrote the book more and more, and definitely through editing, I just kind of made a mental decision that I really wasn't going to try to care too hard what people thought. So I just was as vulnerable and honest as I could be. I just think that honesty and that vulnerability, like people are saying, it just goes so far. And so many people have said, oh, you were so honest. I really don't know how else to be. That's just how I am in real life. So, yeah.
Yep. And Maya,
Yeah, I
do you
agree.
have anything to add?
Yeah, it's just that my children are still young, and so I just respect their privacy in the matter. And I don't mind sharing my story, but I respect the journey of my children. I respect the journey of my husband, and as long as their space is respected, I don't care. I'll tell everybody.
Yep. And Cindy.
Yeah, I think I would echo everything the other authors have said. There's a There's a quote in the 1998 movie You've Got Mail that's always resonated with me. Meg Ryan's character, Kathleen Kelly, says, "Whatever else anything is, it ought to begin by being personal." And I know that when I sat down to write this, I thought, well, the only way to do it is to be authentic and vulnerable and share personal information to make it worthwhile and valuable. I will say I did ask my dad for his blessing before I published the book. There's a lot of information in that book that shares very personal and private information about my mother, my father, our family, stuff that, really only my sister and I knew. And I wanted to make sure that he was okay with that. And he did give me his blessing because he felt like it maybe had the potential to help one other person. But I do feel like maybe there should be a warning label on the book, like there is irreverent humor, there is bad language, and it's brutally honest. But generally, the reaction I get from people is that they appreciate that honesty.
Yeah,
Sure.
as I was reading your book, I found myself laughing as much as I was crying, right? I mean, this journey is horrific. And I find that as a caregiver and in a group full of caregivers, one of the ways that we can make it through is with that dark humor. And people in the community read it and get it. Those that are outside of it may not quite get it. Well, now we've come to the point in our program where we would like to open it up for questions from our audience. Is there anybody who would like to raise their hand and unmute themselves and ask a question? Don't be shy.
By the way, as to the last question, Juan wrote, "Vulnerability and transparency create a deep connection, a human connection." And I think we probably all agree with that.
Chris, you're up.
Hey guys, and again, thank you so much for the authors today sharing such incredible stories. It's incredibly valuable to us, from the medtech side. And Synchron does have a book club, so don't be surprised if we're not in contact to do a reading with one of you guys or all of you guys. I'm just curious for the authors, the term cathartic was mentioned over the course of the conversation. And through your writing process, have you found that writing is more of an emotional release for you, or a deeper recognition of the experiences that you live? And maybe the better way to describe that, is it more an act of letting go or recognizing potentially more deeply some of the things that you may have missed when the experience was lived in the moment?
Can it be both?
Sure.
Because I think when you said both of those really resonate with me. But for sure, the recognizing a deeper meaning of all the things that happened, that you are, when you're living them, when you're going through them, and maybe that day when you sat down to journal it, or maybe you weren't journaling and you just wrote it all at one time later, but whatever, by reliving it brings back, it certainly brings back the experience, but it just gives you more fulfillment and maybe more reasons, like there's answers to why sometimes when you reflect like that. Or how could that be looked at differently or whatever. But that piece, and you said it very well that I can't repeat, but that deeper reflection on what you went through is definitely a big part of it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I will share that for me, it is a gift to myself. And that gift is allowing myself to have grace in the face of this challenge. And for me personally, it's a matter of mental health. If I did not let it out, it would just build up and build up and drive insane.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to add to that? Team Carter? Okay. Well, thank you for that question, Chris. It was great. Anybody else have a question for our authors? Emily.
Yes, I would like to know, since there's been so much talk, I know, on our team about I would like to know how you use AI in your writing, or if you use AI. Um, yeah, and just your thoughts about it.
Mindy.
I could take a whack at.
I think,
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Juan.
Go ahead, Mindy.
Okay, so I'm a Luddite. I'll say that. Um, I hate AI. I absolutely detest it. I have never used AI in my writing. I use an old-fashioned dictionary. I use an old-fashioned thesaurus. And I can tell you that when my book came out, it was an overnight bestseller on Amazon, and an AI picked up on that and wrote an unauthorized biography of me. And I had to lawyer up and get the Authors Guild on my side to undo that mess. So I think if I were a symptomatic patient, which I will be someday, most likely, I might feel differently. But right now, I can just say I am totally anti and I absolutely detest it.
Juan, what were you going to say?
The other side of the coin, being a techie and someone that is into technology and using it. I have explored AI. As I mentioned, I used to be an artist. And for me, not to physically create my book cover was a challenge. And I wanted to make it visually impactful. If you notice, the title is the ALS Express. And that alludes to a runaway train, which is what I think ALS is. And the field of sunflowers represents those living with ALS who look to the sun as a positivity of life in order to endure. So the only way I could create that without investing an artist was through AI. So that's what I did. I don't use it to write, but images I do.
Yeah. I'm the same as Juan on that one. I didn't even think about it on writing because you're writing your story, and I just thought, I don't know. I didn't even know how to ask AI to, they don't know what you went through and whatever. So I didn't even think about it really from a writing perspective, but I did use the cover creator too. And I remember I had in my mind that it was going to be called Buckle Up. So I went in there and I just said, and it was really my first use of it, but I said, so it's a book and it's going to be called this. So I want a seatbelt and I want a road because it's a long road, but I want sun at the end of the road because I'm trying to say that there's hope and that there's faith, keep your faith and all of that. And so they came back with the picture that I ended up putting on the cover, which was helpful, I have to say. But I know what Mindy's saying too. I'm hopeful that AI, this is off the subject of our books, but I'm hopeful that it helps speed up the process of trying to find our treatments and a cure, but I think that's yet to be proven.
Or communication, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Bonnie, we got 2 minutes left.
This is directed mostly at Mindy, but the others can chime in. When you're writing about different generations of your family, do you write sequentially or do you write like the individual segments and then sew it all together?
This book was written Well, it depends because I've been I've been a part of two anthologies, one novel and this memoir. So in answer to your question, they're all different, but generally they follow a sequential pattern with large swaths of flashback. And so it all comes back because memoir is written, it's not an autobiography. An autobiography is your whole life story. A memoir is just from a very small chunk of your life. And so in my case, it's like, 4 years of hell in a handbasket that our family went through. And so it it always had the through line of what was going on. And it was written in real time. So I was writing the book while it was happening. And so it did have flashbacks to come back to the current action.
Good deal. Well, in deference to the last question that Julie asked, I'm going to ask that we do a speed round. Her question is, name one book everybody should read. I'd like each of the authors to think one up, and it can't be your book because we've all read your book. Name a book that everybody should read.
For me, it's the 1619 Project. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
One of my good high school friends just wrote a book called Midlife at St. Margaret's. And if you remember Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, that we read, Judy Blume, back when we were all adolescents. It's sort of that, but menopause for women. It's very
Nice.
funny.
Love it.
We're gonna have to repeat the name of that.
Yeah, we all need the name
Called
of that.
Midlife at St. Margaret's, and the author is Kate Blanchard, and it's just a really fun read.
Fun.
Okay. Anybody else?
For excellent memoir writing, I would recommend The Glass Castle.
Has anybody read Between Two Kingdoms? That's a good book. I can't think of the author right now, but it's the woman, she's married to John Batiste, but it was her battle through cancer and all that she learned. And
Two
yeah,
Kingdoms.
Between Two
Okay.
Kingdoms, I think it's called.
Between Two Kingdoms.
Yes.
Thank you.
I read one recently called The Comfort of Crows by Margaret. I had to look it up. Rankle. It's really, really good. If you like just looking out the backyard at birds and stuff like that, she just writes really, really well. It's beautiful writing.
All right, Juan, bring us home.
I am on a pale horse by Bruce Anthony. It's a spin on death. And the main character assumes the position of the Grim Reaper. And he has the power to make decisions on behalf of the individuals whose souls he takes. But what was fun about it is that instead of a horse, he decides to drive a Corvette. And so it's an interesting take on life and death.
Great. I put all of those book recommendations in the chat. So, last thing, I don't know if we have the ability to save chat.
Yes, I will save it for us.
All right.
So
And save the chat if you can.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate everybody being here. I think we had some really beautiful moments.
Yes.
And I appreciate the audience.
Yep. Sorry. I was just going to say thank you, Ellen and Caroline and Emily for being our amazing moderators today. And thank you for our authors for your time. I feel like we could stay on for another hour and a half with you all. Thank you to our participants. I did put in the chat the link to a document that I created that has the links to the Amazon for all of the books that our authors presented today. And it does have a couple other links about I AM ALS opportunities to volunteer and get involved. So please check that out. And I will follow up with an email with this recording in the next day or so. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
It's really good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.